Bill introductions. Seeing none, we will move forward. Today, we are having a hearing on Senate Bill 43, creating the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act to provide post-secondary educational scholarships for certain two-year associate degree programs, career and technical education certificates, and other standalone programs. And we have our reviser, Nick Myers, that's going to step us through it. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I hope everybody can hear me okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, committee, I believe you should have access to my bill brief on Senate Bill 43, and I'll run through what that bill does real fast for you. Senate Bill 43, as the chair said, would establish the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program. What this program would do would award scholarships to students who enroll in a two-year associate degree program or a career and technical education certificate or standalone program. And those programs would have to be in certain fields of study, information technology and security, physical and mental health care, or advanced manufacturing and building trades. The colleges that could qualify for students that get this scholarship would be Kansas community colleges, technical colleges, and not-for-profit institutions offering those types of programs. And those colleges would be the eligible colleges for the students to go to. For scholarship consideration, a student would have to be a resident of Kansas and meet one of the following criteria, and it's listed in the bill as well. One, the student would have to have had recently graduated from a Kansas high school, have recently completed the requirements for graduation at a Kansas homeschool, have recently completed the school or high school equivalency certificate after attending a Kansas high school or homeschool. There's a provision for adult students, so anyone who is over the age of 21 years old, and when they apply for a scholarship, if they have been resident of Kansas for 3 or more consecutive years, that person would qualify. And then finally, if a person is a dependent child of a military service member who recently completed a high school or obtained a high school equivalency certificate in another state. So to receive a Kansas Promise scholarship, the eligible student would be required to apply for the scholarship, complete the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, enroll in a scholarship eligible program at one of those eligible institutions, and also enter into a scholarship agreement with the State Board of Regents. The scholarship agreement would require this student to enroll as a full-time or part-time student in that program, maintain satisfactory academic progress, and then one of the big ones, that student would have to live and work in Kansas for 2 years after completion of the program, or if the student chooses to enroll in a 4-year institution after receiving the scholarship, would have to fulfill that live and work requirement after graduation or after failure to re-enroll in that 4-year institution. The student would also need to maintain records and make reports to the State Board of Regents to document the satisfaction of those obligations. And then also, if a student fails to satisfy those requirements, the student would be required to repay the scholarship amount plus interest. And the state board in the bill would be authorized to collect upon any repayment account and through any means they find necessary, including turning the account over to a loan servicer or a collection agency, or using the state's set-off program to collect that amount. The amount of a student scholarship would be a last dollar, what's termed as a last dollar scholarship to recipients. So the scholarship would be determined by subtracting any grants, scholarships, or other financial assistance awards that are received by the student from the aggregate cost of the program that the student is attending at the institution. The State Board of Regents, as I said, would be the one to implement and administer the program. And the state board would be required to identify those scholarship eligible programs at the eligible institutions, would also publicize the program, distribute funds to eligible institutions to provide the scholarships, and then ensure that the recipients fulfill their requirements under the scholarship agreements. The state board would be required to promulgate rules and regulations on this program before March 1 of 2022. And the board would also be required to submit annual reports to the legislature and the governor regarding the program. Finally, the bill establishes the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program Fund in the state treasury, and the state board would utilize this fund to distribute scholarship monies to eligible institutions, and all the monies received by the state board for the Kansas Promise Scholarships Program would be deposited into this fund. And then additionally, any repayment amounts that the board collects from students who did not fulfill the obligations would go back into this fund to provide scholarships. And committee, I believe that's all I have, and I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Committee, are there questions? And let me just couch that by, are there questions about specifics within the bill? Not how it would benefit, but specifics within the bill. Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question has specifically to do with on page 1, line 33, a dependent child of a military service member. It says a military service member permanently stationed in another state. I am understanding then this dependent child lives in Kansas. Does this mean that service member? Anyway, could you clarify that?
Yeah, and Tamara is on as well, and she might have some thoughts on that that she could provide as well. But my understanding is that the provision's really targeting a military kid who's in this state who might not actually be, or maybe didn't attend a Kansas high school or homeschool, but they're in this state due to their parent presumably being here as well as a military service member, and that child would be able to qualify for a scholarship under the program.
Thank you.
Senator Gossage.
A couple of questions. One, it says they maintain satisfactory academic progress, but who determines what that is?
Yeah, that's not spelled out in the bill. That would probably be an institution by institution thing or a Board of Regents determination.
And another question, if I may, Madam
Yes.
Chair. It also states that they, a 2-year program, but that if they, part of the stipulation, forgive me, is that they go to a public school for the 4-year program if they decide to go on. They stay within the state of Kansas, but it's a public school or a not-for-profit. So I'm thinking the student in Baldwin, for example, were to qualify, went to Johnson County Community College and wanted to continue at Baker, they would not be eligible. Is that right? Since Baker's considered a for-profit institution.
Baker is not considered a for-profit.
Pardon me?
Baker is not considered a for-profit.
Okay. So what, are there any for-profit institutions for which this would not apply?
Yes, there are. And I think that we have some folks that are going to come and testify that could kind of outline.
But, all right, that's, I have some more questions then for later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other question? Oh, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is on the following fields of study: the information technology, security, physical, mental health care, advanced manufacturing, building trades. I know there's a lot of discussion about this last year. Are those the top needs in the state? Because I know we had originally talked about, difference in the state. So if Garden City was needing other areas, so just where did those fields come from?
Yeah, and this is just what's in the bill, and you might ask that of the conferees where the necessity for these fields comes from. I will note that those fields, presumably in this bill, the Board of Regents would identify all those programs at those institutions that qualify under those fields to get that list out there type of thing, or each institution would have a list of scholarship eligible programs. But as for where those came from, might be best to inquire with some of the conferees.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a cap on any of the scholarship amounts that an individual can receive? Like can they be a forever student, or do they have to complete a program in a certain amount of time?
So no, the bill doesn't provide a cap, and the bill does allow for full-time and part-time enrollment for that program. So the student, I presume, under the bill could receive a scholarship for until the completion of the program. And also, as for a total cap or anything like that, like on the amounts, no, the individual scholarship amount is limited by the cost of the program at that institution under the bill. But for a total kind of appropriations type of cap, there's not one listed in the bill.
I think an important component of it is going to be last dollar. So whatever they receive from Pell, scholarships, and other, this would just be that last dollar. Other question? Yes, Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I feel like I should know this, but where is the money coming from?
Well, that is something that will come up during the hearing.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you that had this bill not been vetoed in the summertime by the governor, we would have been able to use CARES money.
So yeah, committee, Madam Chair, if I may, yes, there is no appropriation being made in this bill for this program. This bill sets up this program and sets up the fund for a presumable appropriation or some other funding mechanism to be used, but there is no appropriation being made in this bill.
Thank you. There's a term I've heard used for an estimate of what something might cost that is normally at the bottom of the bill, or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
I do. The fiscal note.
Fiscal
We
note.
have not received that yet.
Okay, thank you.
When the bill is read in and so forth, the request has been made. We just have not received that yet, so we will have a fiscal note. Seeing no other questions, I am going to have us move on, and our first proponent who will be with us, we'll start off with Dr. Blake Flanders, who we saw last week. Again, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents. Dr. Flanders.
Thank you, Chair Baumgartner and members of the committee. I'd ask, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. I'm here to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 43. The bill would offer Kansans the opportunity to attend public two-year colleges or private nonprofit institutions in our state in pursuit of a technical certificate or associate's degree in the areas of information technology and security, mental and physical health care, or advanced manufacturing and building trades. We know that these are all areas where there is a high demand for a workforce. We have a program that is somewhat similar. It's our Career Technical Workforce Grant, and the regions have an available appropriation of $114,000 in that account, and we've served 572 initial applicants. 100 out of 572 applicants, we gave 138 awards, averaging about $925. So that is a similar program, but it would not be the scale, obviously, of Senate Bill 43. We know that from data that there are jobs that need filled across our state. and that trend has continued. We are very pleased that the legislature is considering an expansion in the state's investment in student financial aid. I've supplied a map in my testimony. It shows the amount of student aid that's awarded in each state from the state, and Kansas has lagged in that area, and we're encouraged that there would likely, with the passage of this bill, be more investment in helping our students. I would say that, again, we're very supportive. I do have not a concern, but I would just elevate that the program will require administration. So anytime we have programs where you need to live in the state 2 years, you need to be in specific programs, those do require a level of administration. And so I know that we will be asking for at least 1/2 full-time equivalent position in order to adequately administer this award. You'd also have to have a mechanism, and our office does that. We do that for other programs, but it does require people to collect if people move out of the state or do not fulfill the obligation. As we are right now, the governor's budget has our agency reduced by $230,000 for next year, and this would require some restoration in order for us to administer the program, which we are eager to do. I would also just ask that people would consider only counting a portion of the Pell Award for the first dollar, because that would not allow students qualifying for Pell to use any of those resources, perhaps for living expense. And I just encourage, as you work the bill, to think about that implication. But again, we are supportive of this legislation. We see it as support for really need-based aid that's so critical, support for our employers and the workforce. And I would stand for any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Flanders. We will continue with testimony, and then we'll circle back on questions. So next up, we have Heather Morgan, Executive Director of the Kansas Association of Community College Trustees. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Get rid of this. Thank you for the opportunity today to address the Kansas Promise Scholarships Act. As you heard from Nick, the bill is a last dollar scholarship program that really focuses on those most high demand industries in the state. And to your question, Senator Sykes, we really tried to put the most in demand programs in the bill, and advanced manufacturing can have a pretty broad definition that can be applicable across the state, whether that's electrical or some of the things that might actually be used in the agricultural field, which is becoming more and more high tech. The thing I wanted to highlight in my testimony is sort of how this functionally would work for a Kansas community college student. Last year, we actually pulled all of our students in some of our technical programs at one of our institutions. And because this is a last dollar scholarship, Kansas students receive roughly $3,600 per semester in Pell. The maximum Pell award for this year is $6,345. The average cost of tuition fees, and then add in $500 for books and supplies, comes to $1,780. So if someone qualifies for a full Pell Grant, they're not going to probably be using this scholarship, because they would have all of their tuition and fees and most of their room and board covered by the Pell Grant. So the way this will functionally work is, let's just take me. If I had an academic scholarship, I had an athletic scholarship, maybe I qualified for Pell Grant, I got the Rotary Club scholarship. All of that is going to be calculated before this program would come into existence. The key part about this program is it's an economic development tool, and we're focusing our scholarship dollars on where our Kansas businesses most need employees. I think when I testified for you all last week or the week before, I mentioned the healthcare shortage we have in the state. So really putting these dollars to work in our most in-demand fields, meeting the needs of Kansas businesses. Just this morning, the Kansas December unemployment state map came out. We are at full unemployment in nearly every county in this state. So the way that we can use this program to allow students to get a certificate or an associate's degrees and stay home and live and work in Kansas for 2 years. If they're here for 2 years, we're much more likely to keep them rather than export our greatest asset, our talented students outside the state of Kansas. One other thing I wanted to mention is when we pulled our students last year, a number of them had already completed SB 155 classes, so they may have had that first certificate. This would allow them to get their next certificate. That affects the fiscal note pretty dramatically. We have a cut in SB 155 funding this year, so those students are being paid for on one hand or the other hand. If we have a cut in SB 155, then those students may not be able to take those same classes that they were for free as a high school student, which would push them over here. So I just wanted to mention that. Actually, the students we pulled had about a semester under their belt towards that technical certificate or an associate's degree because of Senate Bill 155. I will hopefully receive from Cindy this morning a Pell table that is a little bit different than the information I presented last week, but is to try to get to Senator Petty's question. This is for first-time, full-time students at Kansas community colleges. You can see the percentage of Pell qualified students per college, and also the percentage of students who receive some other aid. So at Coffeyville Community College, 97% of students receive financial aid. And 63% of their students receive Pell, and then I have the award amounts. So again, if $1,780 is our average cost, you can see that a lot of students at our community colleges won't qualify for this. This is hitting that gap of students who maybe mom and dad make just a little too much, but not enough for that student to go to think that they can go to college or that they would have to take on student debt. With that, I think I will stand for questions.
Now I'm going to call on Matt Lindsay, President, Kansas Independent College Association and Foundation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Matt Lindsay, the President of the Kansas Independent College Association. That means I speak on behalf of the 20 not-for-profit colleges that are accredited and offer undergraduate degrees here in the state of Kansas. So to go to Senator Gossage's question, yes, Baker University is a nonprofit college in the state. I won't belabor the point that Dr. Flanders and Heather have made already about how this program works. I'm here just to say we are grateful that this bill includes the nonprofit sector as places where students could use this funding as well. While we are mostly bachelor's degree institutions, we have a more messy mix of degree types in our world than we do with the public universities. Because we're not coordinated by the Board of Regents, there's not as much of a strict delineation between associate's and certificate degree programs and schools and bachelor's degree schools. So for instance, take the two schools I have that are primarily two-year institutions, Heston College in Heston, Kansas, and Donnelly College in Kansas City. Both offer primarily associate's degrees, but they are both starting to offer more bachelor's degrees as well. On the flip side, Mid-American Nazarene in Olathe is primarily a bachelor's degree school, but offers a number of associate's and certificate degree programs to students, particularly in healthcare. So for us, being included in very clear language here is a benefit. While we will not have near the number of students that the community college sector would see, we will still be supported for those students who choose to come to our schools. Lastly, we are glad that the bill includes us as a possible destination for those students who complete an associate's degree and want to go on to a bachelor's degree and then do their 2-year service time. The schools they can attend include both the public and not-for-profit colleges in the state, and we're grateful for that inclusion as well. With that, I'll be happy to stand for questions when the time comes.
Thank you very much. Next testimony is from Jim Gannant, President of our Kansas Technical Schools, and Jim is with us virtually.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. There we are. Okay. We can see you now too.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to visit with you a few minutes. You have our
testimony. Go ahead and talk a little bit louder for us.
Okay. I represent the Kansas Technical Colleges. I'm the president at Manhattan Tech. There are 7 technical colleges in the state, and we are very supportive of this proposed legislation to help us fulfill our missions. Among the comments that Dr. Flanders made, Ms. Morgan's made, again, the programs that are highlighted in the bill are probably cornerstones to support the state's economic development and workforce. And these programs are represented by all of the technical colleges. Healthcare, IT, construction trades, and advanced manufacturing form pretty much the foundational pieces of the technical colleges. One of the things I'd like to point out that I think this legislation may benefit if there are appropriations made as well. We get many students in the programs, and when they have their internship and on-the-job training experiences, they often get job offers before they complete the program. They've got basic skills in the areas. The availability of this scholarship may help entice some of them because of its stipulations to stay and complete their program, complete the certificate or associate degree, and that helps all of us. It's hard for us to tell a student to turn down a job when they may get starting pay in the $50,000 to $55,000 range, which is not unusual in some of these career areas. So I do believe this legislation holds a potential benefit to help us get more completers of our programs. One other thing I would address is there is the comment in the legislation about satisfactory academic progress. Each institution has guidelines for that to satisfy our requirements to give out federal financial aid. Generally, standard academic progress relates to you're taking a certain amount of credit hours, you're obtaining a certain grade point average, so that you are making progress towards completing that program of study. And that's a good item to have in the legislation. As you will see in our testimony, the 7 technical colleges are very good at performing. We have strong graduation and job placement rates, a strong return on investment of state funds. So again, we're very much in support of this. It's a win-win for everybody, and I'd be glad to answer any questions when that time is available. Thank you.
Much. Committee, I do want to point out that we do have 6 written pieces of testimony for proponents: Jessica Lucas, Kate Allen, John Jenks, Jerry Farley, Mark Tallman. Excuse me, that would be 5 written letters as proponents. We also have neutral testimony from Tanya Keys from Kansas Department of Children and Families, and Dr. Cynthia Lane and Dr. Fred Dirksen from the Governor's Council on Education. I will point out to you that the Governor's Council has not voted on the Promise Act yet, but they are voting at the end of this week on a plan that does include the Promise Act. So we thought that that was important for you to know. I'm going to open it up for questions now. And so committee members, if there's a particular individual that you want to ask, or if you just want to open it up, that's fine. Who wanted to start? Yes, Senator Dietrich.
Thank you. And really, this is probably more a question for you, Madam Chair. Did any of the language change from last year? I don't see many.
Yes, there is some change from last year. I think that the specifics with regard to the category areas, that is a little bit different, but I see several people nodding their head, and so if someone wants to come up.
Really, it's that we named the different category, the different program areas in the bill. State set-off was added, and there was some other, Nick tried to make this bill match Kansas statute, so there's some other changes, but the big changes are we named the programs. Set-off is in there. While I'm here, the part-time issue, that might be a technical amendment we want to add to say that a part-time student has to take at least 6 hours so we don't have Hotel Californian students forever. But by and large, the bill is the same except for those 2 areas.
Thank you. I felt that it was, so thank you very much.
Very identical. Yes, Senator Sykes.
Thank you. I have a question, and I'm not sure who wants to answer it, but in those categories, was there any discussion about early childhood and the way lack of access to that and how that affects our workforce?
I have had some discussion about that. It wasn't included in the bill simply because of the wage factor, but I know that there are other interested parties who certainly think that that might be a good addition.
Thank you, Heather.
Other questions? Senator Petty.
So actually, mine's along that same line, Heather. I just, because we kind of had a little bit of discussion about this before, is it possible that early childhood would fit under physical and mental health?
In my opinion, that is a stretch, but I suppose anything is possible in this building.
Actually, that's not a good one because it has to be, interpretation after it's passed. So.
I think that that would be something that, quite frankly, if there was a desire for that to be included, it would be more appropriate for an amendment than to expect the Board of Regents and any of the other community college, private colleges, et cetera, to try and make that stretch. So I think it would be more appropriate if that would be something that was brought to the committee as an amendment. Other questions? Yes, Senator Gossage.
So I think I understand why these areas of study, and I had the same question that Senator Sykes did initially. But rather than picking and choosing which fields of study, my question is, couldn't the industry that would benefit from those students graduating from these fields not offer private scholarships rather than taxpayer dollars being used for picking and choosing certain areas of study?
Well, I'll just address that initially, and I will certainly welcome anyone that has spoken already as a proponent. It was decided to make them, first of all, to identify the areas because we know that those are specific needs in our state. Also, broad enough that it wasn't just listing here, 5 here, 4 there, 2 there, 3, and so forth. Because not every institution will offer all of the same types of programs. What we have found, quite frankly, is that business and industry has not provided those scholarships. They have a need, but they have not provided those scholarships. And I think if you look to the map that Dr. Flanders made reference to, it identifies funding that is provided by all of the different contiguous states of ours and how significantly we lag behind. I would welcome anyone else to step forward.
One other thing to think about is, so like John Deere, they are a company that will hire a high school student straight out, put them through the program and hire them. But a lot of other companies don't. The other thing that this bill does that's a little bit different than the actual, I think, past version last year has to do with adult students. So if a company wants to scholarship an adult student, I think that they will still do that, and that adult student is unlikely to apply for the scholarship program because they can get their tuition reimbursement through their employer, and then they wouldn't have this 2-year live and work requirement. Nobody's going to voluntarily go into that provision if they have another option. So I still think that the opportunity for industry scholarships and tuition reimbursement programs is still very much there, and I think that anyone who has that option will avail themselves of it. This is for those other students who maybe aren't connected with a Kansas company yet to get in, and as Jim said from Manhattan Tech, get into one of those internships and then work for a Kansas company rather than being stolen by another state or a company out of state.
And the version, the Promise Act version from the House did not have the adult ed, whereas the Senate version, which was the RISE Act, did have that adult. And so that's how that did get added. First of all, I would like, or I'm going to ask a few questions. One, could someone please provide the committee with just some examples of what the for-profit colleges are in our state? Do that.
Madam Chairman, I can do that.
I know you can because we'll be addressing that later this week.
Yes, this is Blake Flanders, President, CEO of Kansas Board of Regents. You know, there is confusion sometimes on private institutions between the nonprofits and the for-profits. So the independent colleges that Matt Lindsay represents would be nonprofits. For-profits would be Phoenix University might be one that people have heard of. I think we have one here in Topeka, Rasmussen. Those would be the for-profit institutions. What my view would be, and the committee would obviously need to sort this out on your own, but my view would be we have plenty of capacity with the independent colleges and the public community colleges and public technical colleges to serve this need.
Thank you very much. My next question is almost a rhetorical question, but we already heard from some testimony that Pell money is available as well as scholarship money is available. So why would we possibly offer this type of program, the Promise Act. So could someone address how that might bring folks, particularly those that were perhaps displaced during COVID, either the business they work for laid them off or that business has shuttered. How would the Promise Act bring people to access Pell money as well as money that's through the Promise Act that doesn't exist today?
I didn't address this in my testimony, but I did last year. So the way we would market this program is sort of free, the word free. And if you think about students, we all up here know what the FAFSA stands for, and we know that that's a very daunting process, going to be simpler in a few years. But the idea that if you can go to a Kansas community or technical college or one of Matt's 2-year programs for free, if you fill out the FAFSA, we think that we'll have an increased percentage of our Kansas students that will fill out the FAFSA. We're in the bottom third of all states filling that out. So sometimes a student thinks, I can't go to college because I don't have enough money. They don't fill out the FAFSA because they think they're not college material, but if we get them to fill out the FAFSA and say, if you go into these programs, you will have a way to pay for your education, we think that just the marketing of the free part of that will get students who previously thought that higher education was not attainable for them. When it comes to the retraining of adults, a lot of times adults say, I just got laid off, I can't possibly afford college. And so this would give them the opportunity to come back and retrain in a field that has a good job potential into the future, because some of the jobs that we lost through COVID aren't coming back. It's going to be a different type of job, and this would be an opportunity for them to use their unemployment money to support their family and still be advancing their family long-term by taking advantage of these last dollar scholarship program.
You might want to stay there, or someone else might want to address this, but we do know that additional federal funding is coming our way at some point in time. So how can and would that be used for this particular Promise Act program?
So the way that the appropriation will work, to Senator O'Shea's question, in the long term, this will take some SGF funding. So the Appropriations, the Ways and Means Committee, Appropriations Committee will have to make an appropriation into the fund that NICT established. That was one of the other changes. The fund wasn't established in the bill last year. So that they will make an appropriation long-term of SGF. In the short term, our schools, I provided you a table last week, so we have $79 million of CARES Act and Spark dollars that have come into the state of Kansas, and those are for the institutional dollars only. We have another pot of dollars that are for students, and so if this bill was passed, I assume that some of our schools would kind of get a jump start and start marketing scholarships towards these programs, at least somewhat. We're trying to be really creative and innovative to use those dollars in a way that will benefit the Kansas economy long term. And I can't think of a better way than trying to focus scholarship dollars in the program areas where our businesses have the most demand for these workers.
Thank you. Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if this is for Heather or for Blake, but I believe in the legislation last year, there was a provision for like mentorship as part of that. And I was wondering, is that included, I guess, on the Board of Regents side? I think that's a very important piece of that, making sure that the accountability and trying to help students mentor. But can either of you comment on that?
I don't recall that mentorship was a piece of the bill last year. As in the House side, as introduced, there was a community service requirement that they would have to do community service, and then because of some of the internships, that piece got taken out. But what I will tell you is that the community and technical colleges are sort of uniquely positioned and know that we'll have to wrap around support around these students and be very intentional to make sure that they're not only a starter, but to Jim's point, that they're a completer. And so there is no formal mentorship piece of this bill, and I don't think there was in last year's bill. But I think that we all realize that if we are getting more first-time college students or adults who have been out of the education system, we're going to have more support systems.
And that may have been the RISE Act, but I just know those wraparound services making it a successful program. So
Exactly.
Thank you.
We want completers.
Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Dr. Blake.
Could I add
Yes,
to Heather's?
I would like to just,
Sorry.
I would like, oh, go ahead.
Jim?
I
then
would just
Dr.
like to
Blake.
add one comment to the to the mentorship piece, and I think mentorships are incredibly important. And I think they really need to be part of any program, but not necessarily legislated. The issue will be as that even though these are all good ideas, as we add elements, it will literally crush the program in terms of being able to administer the program. And what I would encourage the committee to think about is require us to do an annual report. If course corrections are needed, we can put those in as we go on. But every element that's added at the beginning, which are all good things, can end up making the bureaucracy of a program such that it's incredibly hard to administer. Now, we would just differ slightly with the marketing of this program. We really never say any program's free. We say state funded because we know there is a cost to every program. But what I would encourage the committee to do is as the fiscal note gets moved to the committee, is it is very important to fund the programs that we develop. So as we market this, and I'm calling it a promise, as we market this promise to Kansans, I think it's going to be incredibly important to fund the program. We don't want students coming in and then we need to limit them and prorate this as they come in to enroll in these programs.
President Ganant.
I just wanted to add, there's probably more need for this program than there was last year due to the pandemic and the fact that we have the gap. We have last year's high school students, seniors in particular, that have not come on into post-secondary ed. We're seeing the same trends this year. So I think having this scholarship available, marketing it as Heather and Blake have mentioned, and with that stipulation that you need to stay in the state so you don't have to repay it, but I think there's an incredible potential target audience of the students who did not go into post-secondary ed that normally would have, that can really help the state's economic development and workforce come back, if you will, from the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. I'm referring to the document that Nick provided us, the bottom of page 1, where it talks about eligible students, number 3, which is about the work requirement and staying in the state for 2 years. So how is that going to be tracked? How are we going to track those students is one part of that. Secondly, do they have to work in the field of study that was provided to them? And do they have to be employed full-time or part-time or for how much of the length of that 2 years? And finally, are we going to be able to work with employers to assess the success and the meeting of the employers' needs of the students who are completing these programs? Thank you.
I'll start and then I'll pass this off to Blake for the hard parts. The last part of that is every one of our programs that will fall under these different areas has a business advisory board at each of our colleges so that we're continually making sure that we're teaching the skills that are actually applicable in business. In very simple terms, if we're teaching straight welding and they need pipe welding, curved welding, we've got a mismatch. And so those are the kinds of things that we have our industry partner advisory boards to help us make sure we're teaching it correctly. As far as all the technical aspects, there are a lot of stuff, the way this was intended to be was that the Department of Labor and the Department of Revenue have a whole lot of information about a whole lot of things. And so KBOR could utilize those pieces of information. I don't think we ever dreamt about some of the more detailed parts of that question. And to Blake's point, the more onerous the administration is, the harder it is for the program to actually operate and the more costly it is to operate. But using some of the tools that we already have available at the state level through Department of Labor and Department of Revenue to see tax returns and tax information about working is sort of what we contemplate. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Flanders.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I think I can provide some background. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes. In terms of tracking the student, we receive wage data on all students. So if you're not working in Kansas, it would not pick that up. It will be very difficult in terms of to know if someone's in the job. So if you think about a field on information technology, where would they be working? And even if you look at the NAICS codes for the business, they could be working in a hospital and be working in information technology. They could be working for a number of entities. So generally, as you look at the wage bands for those careers, you can honestly, by the wages, really kind of determine if someone is working at least in their field, or maybe those skills got them a job that pays more than their field, which is probably okay too. But that field of study is very, very difficult to track. The only way we've been known to how to do that is through surveys. And I would just tell you that student graduate surveys can be a very inaccurate tool because you're relying on someone to give you all of the proper information. So, we'll track those individuals on wage data. Any work requirement, though, does require a significant administration. So I think it's a good idea because it allows our employers to benefit. But it does require administration. And then if someone doesn't comply, comes the task of collecting. And so, as you can imagine, that also requires some significant resource.
Senator Erickson, did you have further questions? Okay. Senator O'Shea?
Thank you. What have these industries that we're looking at supporting more of a workforce for, to Senator Gossage's point, what have they done to increase the workforce in these areas? What have they done to try to provide some solutions? And then my other question, it kind of goes along with that. I'm somewhat surprised that none of the, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but none of the testimonies are from those industries that would be ultimately benefiting from this program.
Who wants to address
That's
that?
That's a very good point.
I will address that on behalf of the Wichita Chamber of Commerce, which did not submit testimony in part just because of the bill language wasn't out and we didn't have a chance, but.
We need it for the record. Please introduce yourself, Jessica.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I didn't say my name. Jessica Lucas, Wichita, on behalf of the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. We expect to submit testimony on the House side. Obviously, a lot of the Wichita economy is aviation-based, and we have an ongoing need. Workforce development is part of the dialogue that we have year-round. These kind of programs are important and help ensure that the men and women who come into the workforce are ready to do the work, as opposed to having to spend the money to help train those individuals. So I do believe also the Kansas City Chamber of Commerce is on record with testimony, which would also reinforce industry support as well.
The other thing I wanted to add is a lot of these companies may not be giving scholarships, but they may be giving all of the equipment and doing internships and all things like that. When you think about the small businesses in our state, they may not be able to afford to do the scholarship, but they're helping out in a lot of other ways that might not be financially the same.
That was Heather Morgan, and so now we're going to call on Jim Ganant. Did you have more to add
Thank
to
you.
that?
Yes, thank you. Representing the tech colleges, we see an uptick in businesses providing help on the last part of a student's education. More and more of them are offering to help a student in that last semester with the guarantee of a job and helping pay their way, a scholarship, etc. But it doesn't help getting enough people into the pipeline. Almost every one of the industries that are targeted in this legislation are having trouble getting enough workers. So from our point of view, this scholarship helps us recruit more people into those programs. find out which of them really have the talent, the skill, the work skills, etc. Then we start linking them up, if you will, with the businesses and industries who usually are picking up more and more of the last year or last semester support in exchange for that job commitment, which in turn reinforces one of the purposes of this legislation to keep them in the state.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought Senator Erickson's question was a very good one because we have in the past had discussions about measurement, and we know, for those of us that have been in the legislature, we know that when it comes after like graduation from K-12, that those measurement tools are not simple. And but I think one of the important things for me to keep in mind is we do know that the higher our educational level of our citizens of Kansas, the more likely they are to be productive, and their livable wage over a lifetime is much greater than those with a lower educational level. So this, although I'm very concerned about the price tag, this piece of legislation offers that opportunity to our citizens, our young adults in Kansas, and I see it as being a very forward move because there are already, as you may have read from the legislation, there's already 300 communities in the state, in the country that already have promise programs. I do have one question that has to do with the, and I'm not, this is kind of a little bit into the weeds, but has to do with that on page 1 of the eligible students, and it's concerning the dependent child of a military service member permanently stationed in another state. So I asked this earlier of the revisor, so I'm trying to figure out if it's a dependent child of a military service person that's permanently stationed in another state, then I'm having a little bit of difficulty figuring out. I can see that they would be considered because they've graduated someplace else, but I question about, okay, is that then, are they also then going to have to meet the requirements of working within the state, even though they are, I see some conflict there with them.
I think the original intent, and I'll use my nieces as an example. So their father in the military, and he was shifted around frequently, including sent overseas. So the family, my sister, chose to reside in Kansas because that's where the rest of the extended family was. They went to school in Kansas. So father in the military, stationed elsewhere, but they would still be eligible for this.
And they would then also have to meet all the requirements.
As far as being employed afterward, yes, they would. It's making it not dependent on where the parent is stationed because of that mobility. Senator Sykes, and then our last question will be from Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request from research. We have a couple of other scholarship programs that we offer, and you have to stay in the state. I guess my question is, looking at the history of those, how many have stayed in the state? If employers have paid off that tuition, if we could get a number of how many people we are keeping in the state based on scholarships, I would appreciate that.
Senator Gossage.
I was wondering if Adam Prophet was available to address the fiscal note that we received today.
I don't believe he is with us, but he will be providing that.
We have it.
Oh, okay, you do have it. So do you have a question for him?
I do.
We will take that down and we will get it to him.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead and share that question so we can have it as a part of the record.
Yes. My question is, it mentions, and I'll quote, "While the actual cost per student would vary depending on the college and program of study, the Board of Regents data system reports the average cost of tuition fees and books per credit for students enrolled at the college," and then he lists tuition $84, fees $48, books $33, total $165. And I'm just trying to understand how this all comes together with a true fiscal note.
I would say that it doesn't provide us a true fiscal note because I don't think it's taking into consideration that eligibility for the Pell and other scholarships. And I think the report that we received, the fiscal note we received last year was very high because it did not factor in just the sheer data that we already had with regard to Pell eligibility and scholarship eligibility.
So that's why we see expenditures, they're saying an increase of annual expenditures of $37,532, including salaries and wages, but that's for the Board of Regents, I understand. Those are my questions.
We will find out. We will get a report on that. And I think that I certainly would hope that the proponents that participated today, those that participated in writing, if they have a counter with regard to what it is that Mr. Prophet has provided us, that they will give us that information as well. Senator Sykes?
Madam Chair, I have a question about tomorrow. Can I ask now?
Your question about tomorrow?
Yes, so there's a hearing, and I've had several people reach out to me wanting to know a Senate bill number, and are they going to be allowed, once that is announced, to still get testimony? Okay, thank you.
And several have reached out to me, and I told them if they just made reference either to the House bill. And quite frankly, what we are trying to do is the folks that are testifying tomorrow are testifying first in the House, and then us, we're trying to reduce that footprint so that we can coordinate, and groups of people that are coming in are just needing to come in the once. So thank you very much. Committee, I am closing the hearing on Senate Bill 43, and our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.